Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Merge Roundtable. I am joined once again by my fellow co-host Frank Kushner and Jim Durbin.
I like your radio voice, the way it just popped up.
Howdy, gentlemen.
No. Hello and welcome back. It's
Hello, how are
Mark
you
Hopkins live with the Merge Roundtable.
So
That's what you sound like.
I put out a video this week, and it had a clip from Vivek in it, and the first comment that I got back was, Vivek needs voice lessons from you because you're... We're going to talk about...
on the main stage.
Yeah. No comment. We're going to talk a little bit about some big stuff this week. Actually, one real big story and a whole bunch of other really small ones that you probably missed. So, hey, you know.
And we're going to throw some Christmas and some nice Happy Good Year stuff in there. I'm going to insert that.
Jim's in charge of the nice stuff.
We're going to do some roundtable singing in the round. Ready? Christmas is coming. Sorry, we'll do it later.
All right. So on the docket today, Elizabeth Warren firing the first shot in crypto. Not really. I don't know. We'll talk about it. I don't know if it's the first shot, but it's a big one. Someone died from lemonade. You know, I think that's kind of crazy. We're going to talk a little bit about that. The national debt has reached a new all-time high, as it does every moment. But we're going to talk about a little bit of the stories that kind of have shot off of that new all-time high this week. Section 702 of FISA. See, this is where it gets really down the list. This doesn't sound like a big story, but it is. It's a bunch of numbers that relate to your information being spied on without warrants. What does that mean? Okay. Anyway, these are a bunch of the stories. We're going to have some more as well. Stay tuned after this, and we'll talk about it. Are we in? Are we back? Are we good?
Yeah.
Great. So, yeah, Christmas. This is like the phone it in week, kind of. I feel
There's
like
almost no traffic.
no traffic.
And people were actually polite on the highways today, which is not a Dallas thing
No,
that happens.
not recently.
For those not in Dallas, we don't have the traffic that Los Angeles or Atlanta does, D.C. We don't have that kind of gridlock. We just have idiots
They drive really fast.
for no reason. And lots of paper plates, and they're just
Well, I wouldn't say
completely
it's no
clueless.
reason, because I think what it is they get confused. All of our
We have good roads. The
our
problem is we have concrete, good roads with no potholes, so people drive like
much as
nuts.
they want.
and they all have high numbers on them, like 75,
No.
75 miles an hour. No, it's the number of the highway, but that's kind of the.
Nothing like
boy.
driving down and having someone going 55 in the left lane and 130 in the right.
Getting honked out in the slow lane's fun. Okay, I thought we said we're not going to talk about old people stuff.
That's not old people stuff. That's Dallas stuff.
Yeah.
No, there was actually an article, or there was a feature thing on one of the major news stations talking about how fast everyone drives here and how we actually have like some of the highest mortality rates in the nation.
I'm not surprised. People aren't paying attention. It's not even stuff like they're just on their phones. Oh, that's certainly a thing. It's that they don't seem to be. I think they're just. I don't understand.
Cars are too comfortable.
It might be.
They're quiet. They're
It might be
comfortable.
it.
You don't realize how fast you're going.
Lots of different populations here from lots of different places. It's like all the driving styles in the world come here, and because the roads are good, it doesn't occur to them to not have those problems.
Say what you want about the Northeast, but with all the weather, you've got potholes, and so people drive a little slower.
Unless you're in Boston and they rub your car if you go into their lane.
So let me ask you a question. This is one of the stories further down the list, but I wanted to. It's one that we would normally talk about. Have either one of you heard of the company Figma?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So you know they were looking
blocked.
at merging or getting purchased by Adobe,
Right.
And of course the news this week was that fell apart because EU and UK regulators were saying it wasn't going to pass the smell test on antitrust, and so Figma was given as a condition of the termination of the deal a $1 billion sorry about your luck deal. Sorry
They
about your luck
basically
check.
Conan Figma.
Kinda, yeah. So both parties are not happy about it. They really wanted this to go through, but I can't imagine that Figma is too broken up over it. Now they've got $1 billion free and clear dollars sitting in their pocket.
Yeah. And I don't know enough about the technology to speak specific to it, but from what I understand, they weren't specifically competing technologies. One is more for marketing collateral, as we all know. And then Figma was more of the creation side of the equation. But they figured that putting both of those parts together might make an unfair advantage. But my question, and I don't have the answer to this. I meant to look, but haven't gotten time to look at it. But I think Figma's a private company, right?
Private company. VC,
So their
VC
valuation, must be through the roof, and I bet they probably kind of needed this in order to justify their valuation. So if it's a more than $1 billion company, that breakup fee is great, but that's just going to provide them so much runway to then have to grow on their own. So that's probably the downer for them, is that they knew that there were so many other people that would want to bundle. Like, look at all the, just realistically speaking, we look at Disney Plus and Paramount and all these people that aggregate these different things. This is just an aggregation tool. They already have clients that would want to pay one fee versus two, right?
Right.
So
I mean, Adobe's model is that they are absolutely, like, they've got a bunch of tools in their toolkit, Photoshop, and
Right.
and their video editing tools, and
When you're in the middle, you turn back and forth. You want to make sure you're.
yeah,
That's what I was
gotcha.
pushing. I heard an interesting take on it. Someone complaining on Twitter, and what they said was, I forget when, but was it Apple bought somebody else? I forget the actual pitch, but they said basically there's so many designers there at Figma. If this had gone through, they would have been millionaires. And then they would have spun off and created all the new different companies. And so the guy was actually complaining that the antitrust stuff ruined us of a design-centric future, because now it's just going back to just a software place.
yeah,
Because, there's second and third order effects. Just because a company does it doesn't mean they have it
fair.
for forever. Like, how do you create new stuff? The government can't.
Well,
Sometimes-
that's the flywheel that is Silicon Valley, and it's starting to collapse right now. I read a different headline just earlier this morning that said
Regulatory capture, here it comes.
something like 38% of all venture capitalists in the Palo Alto corridor have dropped out of being VCs in the last year. That certainly will have no effect on anything. I mean,
Well, for anyone who is interested, please watch. There was a Bill Gurley speech when he recently retired, and it was a number of miles, like 2,178 miles was the title of his, something like that was the title of his speech. And he talks about that, the regulatory capture. He's a good old boy, started Benchmark Capital, and he's now retired. And he gave his kind of swan song address talking about all of the regulatory capture and how the government is now coming for venture capital firms. And by doing that, they're going to ruin the spontaneity, the flywheel, if you will, that created all this creativity.
Well, here's the question. Do VC firms add any real value to anything but
Absolutely.
stock profit?
Well, isn't that the whole point? Like, you literally do something and create something so that you can monetize it. And that usually leads to something else. Like, most of these guys are so serial entrepreneurs, but they find stuff while they're building other stuff, which leads to other really cool stuff. But if you take away that profit motive, then there's no motive. And then people just do that, right? Like you said, it goes back and now they'll work for Adobe and now they'll work for someone else.
Right.
So you stifle that innovation because
look at
regulatory.
East Coast companies versus East Coast tech companies versus West Coast tech companies, and the venture capital cycles on both of them. On West Coast, we're familiar with that. That is
the valley in the alley, Silicon Valley, Silicon Valley,
just like you described. Like, all these companies are gonna create a bunch of new millionaires, and those guys go out and try to start companies, and most of them will fail, but we get a bunch of cool new products out of it, and a lot of them get acqui-hired and incorporated into the products we already use, and some will become the next Figma.
And then the rest sit around and lecture us about they learned all their lessons.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Now that they've made their
Hustle.
millions, now they're going to step out and tell you, now I want to spend time with my family. Now I
Hustle
want
and
to work out. Now I
grind
want to
and
give back.
work hard and believe in yourself and all the other things. But then on the East
now
Coast,
I want to create an ERISA benefit plan company.
but on
ERISA benefit consultant.
the East Coast, the VC startup cycle is much more serving of the large corporations. Like, basically, I saw this happen when I was at SiliconANGLE dozens of times. You'd see some guy who was the leader of a small division or a medium-sized division at IBM or HP or somebody like that, and they would they would say, okay, I've got my success. I've got this team that I've built up that are loyal to me. I'm going to go out and start my own thing with the money that I've got from making all these fat checks over as a VP at IBM. They go do the thing. They'd work on that for 3 years. And they called their boss up back at IBM and go, okay, it's time for you to buy my company.
Yeah.
And they would get bought. And it was basically just like being able to go out and do R&D outside the company. There was no innovation that propagated out into them.
And you need that. You need that because if you take a look at, a public company, they have to justify every expense, right? And then they have to create bloat because you've got to have somebody that's going to oversee that project. And then you have to go to these meetings. You have to do all that stuff. You don't have to do that when you're a private company. You don't talk to specific shareholders. You have a board, maybe, depending on how far along you are in the cycle. And so that creates all of that.
It's a significant point here because there is a difference in those two models. And unfortunately, when people say startup, they think it's the same thing. But startups in Silicon Valley are not like the rest of the country because you can pick the dumbest idea in the world, but then you do 10, 20, or 30 of those. One of them hits, you made your money because there's always another one. And it's not even that it doesn't matter the idea. The question is, how good were you? Is the company buying you to do it? So it's a lottery system, but there's so many tickets. The idea is that you win one of them. When you do startups in Dallas or Austin or St. Louis or Cleveland, there is no exit like that. You're living the startup lifestyle, but there's no chance for the $1 billion payout for the folks. Versus Dallas, when I first moved here, this was crazy watching it. We have the startup scene, but we do have successful growth businesses. I think of ITCO, which is spun out from CA Tech, exactly like you were talking about. They had 4 or 5 different executives. They rolled out. They created the service virtualization, which is basically, if I have to see, Bank of America can't just test something because their network is the world. You can't just build a second network. So the service virtualization basically runs like a recorder in speed. When they're watching the movie and then they played it back at the tape so it looked like they were doing the same thing. That's what it does. It tracks it so you can real time see what happens. Grows, gets folded back into CA Tech. Later on, they go start another one. So Dallas companies aren't startups. They're actually funded small businesses from large companies that are guaranteed to win.
Kind of incubator model, right?
So that's not a startup. They make good money, but it's a totally different kind of, they have customers day one. They're not trying to transform it. And once you get that and you work with those companies, you make money. You play with startups. We don't have startups that explode and make you money.
Overnight success is 4 years, right? I mean, it really is. It's like people just, oh, wow, they came out of nowhere.
Yeah,
Didn't really.
because you weren't paying attention.
They've been in the garage for a long time, believe me. This you've got to build the rails before you can build the technology. But the difficulty is specific to Washington's. Look at me over here. Roll over here. You're doing something, right? Like they finally kind of realize that there's a lot of money in technology, and they want to control it, which is, for all intents and purposes, not a great idea.
Well, look at the Microsoft attacks on Microsoft from the Justice Department in the 90s.
It killed them for 20, 30 years,
but then led to Citizens United. All of a sudden, the tech company's like, you know what we need to do? 1, we need to start paying lobbyists. And 2, we need to start hiring people from the government to sit on our boards so we're protected. Yeah. Which was, and now it's like that old IRS. Oh, I worked for the IRS for 20 years. I know all the secrets. And now I'm going to protect you. Now everybody in Washington's looking for that payout of, I worked in it. Now I go sit on a board, and it's political, and it's really kind of terrible, but
yeah. And
at least DC housing prices keep rising.
Yeah. So. One of the things that I found fascinating, though, is like you generalize something that I think bears a little bit of consideration. So you're right. A lot of the sharks are on the West Coast and the East Coast, but there is tremendous research and development going out in the St. Louis and the Missouri area. I mean, oh my goodness. Like talk about really fascinating stuff coming out for agricultural and just medical research. There's just such an amazing hub there, but they are reasonable to work with when you're looking at ideas. Their valuations are much better than if you look on the coast. They're more reasonable and they're more seasoned. There's like so many people from that area that have actually had multiple exits, but they're just not looking for the home run. They're doing, okay, I created this, now moving on to this. And hey, you've got entrepreneurs swapping positions. You might have a public private. You might need a C-level executive that's going to take you from public company to public private company, from private company to public company. And so they're bits and pieces, and it's a much more realistic and reasonable model.
St. Louis is a river city. And so you got hundreds of years of history that created that because it's got very rich people that have been there a long time. And what they realize is money doesn't go away. St. Louis was a hub of innovation and at the early part of the century and had been. It was one of the largest cities in the world at one point and the richest because all the cotton coming up the river until the railroads came out. So what happened is they had all these inventions. It is the number 2 trust fund city in the country. That's why they had the trading desks, A.G. Edwards, Citibank, Edward Jones, Stifel Nicholas. They had all that
What's
stuff.
the girl-to-guy ratio there?
But because they were private companies, all these big names that people didn't have it, there was a tamp on wages. So when I lived there in the early 2000s, do you know how hard it was to make 6 figures? You got 25-year-olds in Chicago and Los Angeles doing it. Here they'd move people in. You made 70, 80, you moved out to St. Charles, and you created a whole culture there. But even getting executives high pay didn't work because there was a guy, it was Rich Malone, Edward Jones, was a senior vice president, which was a privately owned company. Somebody wanted $140,000, and he looked at him and said, I only make $180 and $10 million in stock, but I only made $180. So the fact that Blue Bloods owned those companies and were comfortable and they had all the land, didn't need to do anything, tamped those salaries down for years. Pfizer moves in, it moves from Groton and moves in to basically built it. And all of a sudden people will sell their houses in Michigan and Connecticut, move there, created a whole $1 million house industry.
Wow, yeah.
And the next thing you know, and then you got Square kind of going there. You have Bayer buying Monsanto. You've got Royal Canin. All that. There's a lot of companies that people didn't know that are there, but it took a moment. And then some of the older families started selling their land, which they hadn't done in the middle. So like there's just wild, crazy stuff. I moved to Dallas, and I'm sitting talking to David Perry Miller, who's a real estate guy that's over. Went to the same school. I ran into him one day in Highland Park, and he sat me down and explained what happened. In Dallas, remember the Kilgore oil wells went dry?
Yeah.
So I remember that in middle school because all of a sudden the rich kids went from wearing 2 polos to 1.
Yeah.
That's how we knew something was wrong. They only wore 1 polo. It wasn't fashion. It was their parents like, I'm not buying any more polos. And what happened is, and because it's energy, rich folks in Dallas realized something that no one else does in the river cities. Money can go away. So they begin to invest, call centers, telecommunications, and they built Dallas into this basically burgeoning market just to make sure that you're not just dependent on oil prices. And so that's why Dallas has exploded in the last 40 years because rich people were afraid their money would go when they wanted to diversify. Versus in the smaller river towns, it's so much, they're doing fine. They have real estate. They don't have to worry about it. And we don't think about those. We're like, oh, it's just the same. But every city is going to be different based on what's going on. And it can go back generations.
Yeah.
But now it's exploded because the value and people coming back. And Pittsburgh is the
so
same
much
way,
talent,
Cincinnati.
Do you realize when we lived in Tyler, it was bigger than Dallas?
75,000 people was bigger than Dallas?
Population, Tyler proper and Dallas proper was Tyler was bigger at the time.
When you watch Dallas, the TV show,
Yeah.
and you watch the opening credits, it looks like downtown is surrounded by farmland because it was.
It was.
You know that,
But that goes to further illustrate your point. Tyler's economic policy versus Dallas's economic development policy. Tyler did not diversify.
No, they didn't have that. Well, they didn't have the workforce.
Separated by 100 miles. Well, neither did Dallas.
And they decided to do so.
Yeah.
Do you know that bridge, the purse bridge, we call it? I forget what the name of it is, but it's like a purse handle sticking out of the ground.
Sure.
The white one? That one?
Yeah. So we did a Habitat Humanity thing where we went and we built a house. Texas Air Systems was doing something, and they went and they rehabbed this 94-year-old woman's house. And she was telling stories. She moved here in like 1942 from Louisiana. Her husband, a carpenter, and her built that house. They had the only water pump that was around, so they'd sell water by the bucket to other people. And she was like, oh, we had about 40 head of hog, and this is not very far from downtown and not that long ago. You're like, oh, my God, like we don't think about those, but the city has grown enormously. At Richardson, 635, they used to shut that down and drag race on it in the 70s. Can you imagine shutting down 635 and drag racing and nobody, because there's not, I mean, that's crazy, right? That's,
I mean, I remember we used to do that on the tollway, like in the 2000s.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was before it was growing out there. Went all the way up to Prosper and stuff.
We would go up to the north side where the tollway ended and just drag down it.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, and
I remember Forest Lane. We drag raced.
On
I mean,
Forest?
we wouldn't because that would be.
I can't even drive my truck on Forest because people
it's
keep
like
trying to rub me.
it was called the Emerald. In high school. It's crazy.
So going back to your point and transitioning to the bigger story for the week, lobbying, companies spending lobbying. I did a quick tally of the social media companies and what they spent on lobbying in the last year.
Wow.
Meta spent $15 million. ByteDance, TikTok's parent company, spent $4.5 million. Google spent $9.5 million. Snapchat and the others that kind of round out that category all spent in the neighborhood of about 10 each. So for a grand total of about $40 million spent by just social media tech companies in the last year. Interesting basis of comparison, and this is where it transitions to our crypto story of the week. Open Secrets recently published this week that crypto companies spent $18.9 million on lobbying in Q1 to Q3, up from $16 million in the same period last year.
Shows you that politics is getting involved. I have to step out, make one quick call, but I'll be back.
Okay.
We'll be here. You want to do that in the round thing? Christmas is coming, the geese are getting fat.
Okay, so I mean, I know we can talk about crypto, or we can wait for Frank to come back because it's kind of a finance story. But the idea there's a social media story that you and I can talk about that is gaining ground. I know you're not a Mastodon user,
Right.
but you've heard me.
I know what it is.
Talk about
You've
the
been trying to pitch
Fediverse.
it to me for years.
Yeah. So two big changes in the Fediverse, which is around 10 million
Every time
active.
you say it, I think of Kevin Federline. I feel like it's in some alternate place where he created this big social network called the Fediverse.
Yeah, well,
Just so you know, every time you say it, that's what I think.
whatever helps.
That was Britney Spears' ex-husband back in the day.
Yeah.
K-Fed.
Whatever helps the brand recognition for you, I'm fine with it. No,
Should be the
the
K-Fediverse.
K-Fed. Well, that's an entirely different product.
Different timeline.
Yeah. So Threads, everybody's least favorite social media network.
I like to post stuff on there knowing that I'll never be canceled because no one will ever read it.
Right. Yeah. Well, now people in the Fediverse can read it because they are allowing syndication of your Threads timeline to the ActivityPub network, and saying that they're going to have a completely bidirectional system.
Why? Explain this to me. I don't understand.
Well, it
why
was it was one of the things they promised whenever they launched the product. So we're gonna have
So it's just a
full
it's
Fediverse
designed
integration.
to be basically a
node
composing-
within the Fediverse.
Huh. But then what about engagement and all the other stuff that people do? It sounds like they're turning themselves into a WordPress kind of thing. We're going to create
On
content,
Threads?
push it somewhere else.
On Threads?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what the Mastodon and other ActivityPub enabled systems are in the first place. They are the WordPress for social media. It allows you to run your own instance. This would be more like the WordPress.com of the Fediverse because it is a completely encapsulated system, but it does have interoperability with the rest of the Fediverse system.
Aren't you required to have some kind of disclosure about how much you love WordPress? And then I'm supposed to say, no, I still love movable type.
Yeah.
Like, is it not? I don't know if you own stock in the company, but man, you love that so much.
Here's why I love it, because I am, it's no secret.
Because it powers the internet.
I'm a
Yeah.
decentralization maximalist. I feel like everything should be decentralized to the absolute maximum extent that it can be, and WordPress has walked that walk
Right.
since inception and has maintained a profitable business all these years, and while adhering to those principles.
Do you remember how they got big?
Well, I mean, just by
Well, a
powering
history
the
lesson
blog
going
revolution.
back, you probably remember this because Blogger came along and that was the first pushing one. And you had GeoCities before that, but that was just a nightmare.
Right.
Right? And you had your MySpace stuff. But Blogger came along and everybody started utilizing it. And you created two things. You had WordPress and movable type. And movable type turned into TypePad. And that was the professional buttoned-up good one. And then Squarespace was the side one. Mm-hmm. WordPress was the favorite of the mommy bloggers. And there were so many of them that it quickly had so many people. And it had to be easily used to put together. So because they were pushing out of doing it, TypePad was requiring like $9 a month or $15 a month. WordPress was free on your installation. So they just got swamped very quickly. Everybody was on WordPress in the space of a few years. And then, I didn't think people talk about TypePad anymore. Squarespace restarted at Southwest a couple years later, but it got dominated by giving away free stuff. It's basically the Keller Williams of the software world.
Well, and also Squarespace is WordPress.
Is it really?
They forked the code and made it closed source.
See, this is why we bring you along the little tech nuggets that get people excited.
Same thing with Wix too. Wix is a fork of WordPress. Wix and Squarespace.
I feel like there's that new movie that Kevin Hart has on. It's a series on. It's kind of like Hollywood Dads. I actually couldn't believe how much I laughed because it was at one point Neil deGrasse Tyson comes on and goes, "I didn't know Mike Tyson's daddy was an astrophysicist. That right hook, I saw him, and you're like, it's hysterical because he's making fun of himself.
Yeah.
It's like Extras, where all the actors would say, like Ian McKellen's like, what I do is I imagine myself as a wizard, and then I pretend that's guy, and it goes through like 2 minutes of how he acts, which is, but that's the kind of thing so it's the clone of a clone of a clone.
Yeah, yeah.
Wix feels like the third clone.
It's stating stepped on, definitely.
The not great one.
Yeah. Yeah. So at any rate, that's not the only big Fediverse news this week. Also, Flipboard, remember them?
Yeah,
that was great.
Yeah, I like that.
Flipboard
Best use of the iPad for a long time.
Flipboard has said they're replacing their entire social back end with Fediverse compatible ActivityPub integration. Meaning, if you have, and that's a whole roadmap of like progressively more and more integrated with the Fediverse. But if you have a Flipboard publishing account, you will be able to be subscribed to now by people with Mastodon or any other ActivityPub enabled app, which includes WordPress. WordPress is also on the ActivityPub standard now. So really, we're looking at a future where, the majority of the web is going to be open source ActivityPub compatible. There is a real path forward for ending the dependence on these large scale social networks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can do a newsletter. I'm thinking of doing a newsletter. And what's the problem with the newsletter on LinkedIn? I can't export my stuff. I can't pull them off. I am at LinkedIn's whim.
Let me ask you a question about publishing. So obviously, you know that I'm looking at doing an article. I want to do an article on fiduciary duty across ERISA plans, retirement, as well as pharmacy. Now, obviously, I want to. Yeah, I know you start getting narcoleptic.
I actually do love this story. It's actually good.
So I'm just trying to figure out. So like, I want to do this article and I want to submit it to the traditional publishers, but I don't know if they're going to pick it up or not. I can't even find how who to actually send it to so that they'll do the editorial, right?
Right.
But if I can publish it myself on LinkedIn, that's fine. But does it have the same clout?
Not at all.
It'll probably have the same view. It'll probably have more viewership, but it will have less clout. Nothing that points at it, right?
Well, you're publishing an article. It's the difference between Wiley and self-publishing. If I say that I'm a published author and I'm for Wiley, everybody goes, "Oh, you're legit." If you say published, they want to know how much have you made, and it better be a lot. I mean, I sold 5 million books. Oh, okay, and now you're legitimate. So it has to be the size. But what is the real value of having a publication? The whole is they review it, but they're so hungry for content themselves. And we've read so much, so much of it's just bad content because anybody can write now. So the question is, do you cheapen yourself a little bit and throw a joke and maybe an emoticon into it? No, of course not. But that's kind of what it takes. So it's this weird moment where what was considered, I mean, you get an author, you're a published author. Oh, I was in the paper today. There's still people who believe that. So it really is a question. We're not sure.
I'll do a real life question. I'll ask both of you. Answer separately. Okay. If I say so and so is a Forbes published author, does that to you sound like they have clout?
Sure.
What about you?
.com?
Yeah.
Online?
Yes. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Forbes is that brand that back in the 2000s they mortgaged their brand for view counts, and they accepted anybody that was had a little bit of clout, said you'll become a Forbes published author, just give us free content.
Insider.
Right. And so, but they've got hundreds of years of equity, brand equity. So it's someone who isn't on the inside of that publishing.
If you were in Forbes magazine, which I haven't seen, don't purchase, and don't even know it's still printed, that would be. I'd be like, okay, that's legitimate.
Right. There's scarcity there.
But online,
yeah. So that's really. I mean, are you worried about reach or are you worried about credibility? What are you trying to build?
Yeah, credibility. I want the credibility.
Then you go for that. And if you publish somewhere else,
the reach will go later, right? You could always take that article and point to it on LinkedIn.
I just did that. I've got stuff being published at hstar.com because I didn't want to just publish it on my own site because that gives a credibility that's slightly different. So which one? There were not the views that I would have seen, but now I can take and push it around as seen in something that's kind of a
Right.
yeah. It's
So
a
that's my
strategy. It's a
thought.
media
Like, I don't know
strategy now,
what, and at that point, I don't know, like, what's the rights to it, how that works. But anyway, ultimately,
Well, you
it's just
own
for
it.
me, for me, it's specific to, something that I want to be able to, in my own way, poor man's patent, just talk about it and own
100.
it and say, this was it. This
We
is
get
what
that
should
published.
be,
And then, if you're really lucky, it's reprinted or republished. The rights are actually sold to something larger, and you show up in the journal or you show up in some other place. And
Get $20,
yeah, but it's
real.
That's when it gets the extra reach,
Right.
right? If it has the extra piece, and if it doesn't, then you push it around and publish it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no one-hit wonders anymore, and no one pays attention if you are. So you're better off. It's like if you're going to create a web series, create 100 15-second clips, build your characters, then launch it. Now people are engaged. You have a built-in audience, and that's what it is. How do you find a built-in audience? Who are the ones reading? Who matters? Would you rather have 100 people read that and give you $1 billion, or would you rather have 1 billion views and you got paid $100 for it? It depends on how you're going to use that fame. I mean, I'd rather have.
I want the billion.
I'd rather 4 people read it, call me, and give me a check than, I get to brag to people that I was published in some journal.
Yeah.
You know,
Right, but that may not. It's horses for courses. It depends on your end goal, what you're trying to accomplish. So, if you want the money or the
Yeah, in this case,
viewership.
I want in this case, I want the credibility. But then, again, it's just so interesting because then now you have to look back to which is the better use case for what you're trying to achieve, right?
Right.
So it's neat because it's not something that I put any thought into because my business in the financial planning world is always word of mouth anyway. So now having to figure out a new strategy based on something I've never done before is fun.
but it's an old one.
Yeah, but it's an old one, but it's fun.
Real marketers. I'm a real marketer. Unlike those internet marketers that just sold email list and affiliate links, they were flying around making $20 million on private jets. I had a job with Nestle. I didn't, but that was the whole fight. Like, these guys are making so much money, but they end up all going to jail, hookers, girls gone wild thing, because they're selling affiliate. Like, they were bad people with too much money versus you might have only made $75,000, but you can brag to your grandmother that you worked at Anheuser-Busch. Which one do you go? Are you going to go on the OnlyFans and then make a bunch of money? Or are you going to go the traditional route? And it's the same thing. Do you want cheap, fast fame, or do you want to be lasting? And I don't think people think hard enough about it. The fact that you're even asking suggests that you're very old. No, what it is you understand that
Thanks,
there's
Ron. I appreciate that.
you understand that there's consequences to those, and it's not either or, and you can't be looking at somebody else saying, why is this guy getting so much attention? It's like speaking. People love it when you speak at conferences. I don't think anyone realizes you lose money going to conferences. It costs you not only in the actual dollar amount, even if they pay you, in the time, the preparation, and the lost time. You can lose a week for an hour speaking spot at a conference with travel and tired and all the rest of the stuff. So you better make your connections. But everyone's jealous because you're speaking. You're like, I'm broke. I prefer to make money, but it is always a choice. And I wish why this people were clearer about that. I just feel like no one understands risk tolerance. Like, it's not this is right or wrong. It's what are you prepared to lose? What are you trying to win?
Use the right tool for the right job too, right? Ultimately, as we talked about for us, when I did mine at the Dallas HR conference, it was, 3 weeks of hell trying to figure out exactly what I was going to do, what my audience was going to be. And then you get there and you see that it's not the exact same type of audience you thought it was going to be. So you have to pivot. That's stressful on its own, but then you throw in the cost of the actual conference, throw in all the ancillary stuff you had to put into it, the time, and then if you didn't have any reach. Now, I will say on the other side, when we were at Art Basel in Miami, we were talking about an artist, or actually a gallery owner who was asked the question, how much did it cost to come to Art Basel? And he goes, I don't know. I sold $82 million worth of art. I don't care.
Right.
So then there's that part too, right? So we want to get to that side, but there's a lot in between. So,
Well, they always
as
look
you
at the
said,
top.
yeah.
Oh, I'm going to be a real estate agent. Most of them don't make any money. Like 95% of them don't make any money. Few of them make fortunes, but they all watch something on TV. Well, I'm going to sell this $3 million house in Soho. It's like, well, that guy is. But he's actually making his money from being on TV. It's like the Sharks made more money being paid to be on Shark Tank than they did from any other investment.
Yeah, and that goes back to exactly what you're talking about. If you take a look at and I don't know his motivations, I don't know anything about it, but if you think about Cuban, right? He said that he's coming off a Shark Tank. He doesn't want to be involved in that part of the industry anymore. I'm going to spend more time with my family. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. If you take a look at one of the pretty famous, wildly famous podcasters, David Friedberg, he has basically said that he's going to focus all his energies on one company and be the guy in charge, as opposed to being on the boards of all these other companies because it's too onerous, right? And so I see a lot of people starting to focus again and trying to
the money's free now. There's consequences to losing versus just like Silicon Valley. There's always another company.
Right.
There's not always more VC sitting out there. It's actually because there's a movie coming out in a trailer. I don't know if you've watched the trailer. It was Rand Fishkin, who's created SEO Moz and Spark Hire, and then the guys from HubSpot. And the movie is about, it's called The Great Big Cheat Code or something like that. It was a trailer set out. And it's basically, they set out to create these companies. They had money backing behind it. So they built these billion-dollar companies and then were forced out. And now they're looking back going, well, we made some money, but we built these great people. We mentored them. We had these great teams and we lost all of it. What if we had kept it smaller? Made our good. I made $10 million. It's great. But then I passed it on to somebody who I knew would keep that legacy versus just selling out to a large corporation because it's sitting there. So it'll be interesting to see, are they doing that same thing like Chris Sacca did? Well, I worked hard and then I bought a house in the mountains and I brought all my friends there and now I've made billions of dollars because they sit in a hot tub in the middle of the forest as opposed to, because you're dragging them out. It's actually a brilliant strategy, but everyone has regrets after they fixed it, but they want to make their money. So it'll be an interesting movie to see, does that change how founders look?
I can't wait to look at it because that's, of all the things, this is that overnight success takes 4 years. Like just building the rails of something to make it bulletproof so that no one can come in and take it from you.
I did see that trailer, and to me, my response was, that's great that you're drying your tears with your $100 bills.
Yeah.
I had the same exact experience, and I didn't have a multi-billion dollar exit.
Yeah.
And it was from the startup life. So you know what? Like, welcome to the world of startups. It's tough, and it sometimes breaks your heart. But not all of us get a lottery ticket like you did, so maybe be grateful for what you have.
No, I still want to be relevant. Remember when people used to see I was relevant, and that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
People, it's just to suck up to them.
So build a different company next time. But now you have the ability to do it because you made a bunch of money off your last one.
Nothing I hate more than somebody telling some story from corporate America about how it used to be and how they changed, and you're like, you were in it, right? You knew this was going on while you're in there.
Right.
To come back now, like the generals that retire. Oh, it's so bad. I'm whistleblowing. No, you whistleblow when you're inside because there's risk. There's something you lose.
Right.
It's,
Yeah.
it's a different kind of game.
Yeah. So but the all the analysis I've seen on next year for the venture capital things, to button up that story, is that they're expecting more capital to start flowing now that the rates are going to stop going up. And
I think that's wishful thinking.
More investment to happen. Well, because the deeper analysis on that 38% number is not that the venture capital itself went away. It was that the funds were sitting idle in a down market.
Right.
And if the market no longer is so bleak, they will feel more liberal about spending those dollars on new companies.
So we had some news came out today. The core CPI, the inflation indicator that the Fed really likes, came out cooler than expected, which means that they suspect that they were right to not raise any more rates again, and now people are pushing it forward. That's why you're seeing the market rocket for the past couple few weeks. The difficulty when it comes to the private equity venture capital world, private equity, they're the smart guys. They aren't going for home runs or going for the singles. Venture capitalists are going for bigger swings. And the problem with venture capital right now is that, like, again, you need money in motion. You're charging a management fee. You've got these funds, but you don't want to actually put the money in to specific investments because maybe there's too much burn, there's too much bloat, there's bad business models. But because of that, they don't put any money in. They have for the past couple of years. This year, they're hoping that people will feel comfortable again. There's a ton of money in cash, right? And like, there's no appetite for risk. Well, we need a reason to have appetite for risk. Now, we just went through a 45% up year, right? For whatever reason. And now we're showing some cooler inflation numbers. So they're thinking some of that cash will unlock, which will mean that people will be willing to buy and ride these IPOs up, as opposed to what happened in the past couple of years. You saw Snowflake came out at like $120, went up to 2-something, 300 and something, and then back down to like, 120. And then it's like, that is not an exit that you want, because if you're a venture capitalist and you don't sell it right there on the open market,
right,
you're going to be locked for 6 months. And that means between now and that 6 months, if that stock goes to zero, which it has happened in many of these private equity companies, they've lost all that money. And their fund return now looks terrible. And then they have to close up their shops. They don't want that. But you've seen a lot of them do that lately. Anyway, so I guess that's a long way of saying that we're hoping that lock releases and more exits happen, so that more people have this money to start investing in some of these smaller ideas and these smaller things. And by interest rates going down, it hopefully will allow cheap money to make these companies flourish. And that's what's
Here's an
going on
interesting
right now.
counterpoint, because you're talking about stocks and all that, and the big money flows. Let me tell you what's going on in companies right now. We still have a lot of the zombie companies that have been rolling over their debt. They should have been trashed years ago, but because it was so cheap, they could just keep buying and then put that back into their stock price.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of those companies that have not suffered enough pain, and a lot of people working at jobs that don't make any money and don't realize that they're just staying afloat until they crash. But we are seeing smart companies start to invest. Like there's a lot of hiring of recruiters, which is usually a pretty good sign, because it means they're ramping up. There's changes in the way they're looking at tech. There are small and medium-sized companies who are focusing on real excellence, while everybody else, and then there's others just sitting there paralyzed. So I think this is why I'm telling people, so be careful about what company you pick, because if you pick one that's focused on profitability and growth and doing it right, they're going to do well. If they're casting about searching for revenue for the next quarter, it's a dangerous place to be right now, because it's all about smaller jobs that are more profitable and you doing well, as opposed to I'm going to grow another 50x. And that might be the world coming forward, with small profitable companies doing better instead of money driving massive growth for something that gets made up. I mean, no more WeWorks. They're sitting out there, but you can still make money in real estate. Do you think that I'm worried about the inertia of people who just can't let go of the past and don't realize that there's not a flood of money coming to them? It's going to be smarter money than in the past. Do you think money's going to be smarter after the last 20 years?
For sure. I mean, like, there's all this cynicism. Like, one of the most viral tweets in this whole conversation for the week that I saw was somebody who was lampooning the silliness of what's been venture backed for the last 2 decades. He goes, "What's your favorite tech innovation? An illegal cab company, an illegal hotel chain, fake money for criminals, or plagiarism machine?" And I responded, "I love all of my children equally." So, but it does say something about like where people's heads are at. That this was such a.
That hurts my heart a little.
I know, right? Just reduce all of the last 20 years of innovation to a big burn. Yeah.
That's so funny.
I wish I was crying all the way to the bank.
Right? Wipe some tears with those $100 bills.
I do want to thank you, Facebook. You did help my life many.
See, that's the light we were looking for.
Yeah.
There you go. It's the Christmas cheer.
So I'm getting up my ham today. I pick it up, and the woman looks at me, the young person sitting there, and she looks at me, she goes, "What's a good last name?" And I said, "Durbin. That's a pretty good last name." And then I waited a beat, and I waited a beat. She didn't laugh. The guy behind her did. And she goes, "How do you spell that, sir?" But that's a great, because it reminds me, I had an old friend of mine. I love it when he does it. We go out to breakfast every month or so, and he'd sit down, and he always had a joke about the tea or a joke about something. The waitress would come up, "How do you like your eggs, honey?" He goes, "Oh, I like them fine." No, how do you like them cooked?" "Oh, even better." Yeah. I mean, it was just a kind of, now that I'm getting old enough, I'm going to start dropping those on a regular basis, because it's you can tell if someone's in a good mood or not. Sometimes they're just, no, it's 9:30 in the morning. Why am I working?
So I think you recommended, or maybe Irish did, the Dungeons and Daddies D&D podcast.
Guaranteed that wasn't me.
Okay.
That does not sound like
it's just
family-friendly podcast.
It's just four guys that are playing D&D. It sounds way worse than it is. But
hilarious.
every time
Dungeons and Daddies.
every time one of them cracks a dad joke in game, the whole table has to take psychic damage, has to roll for psychic damage.
Oh my god!
I think that there's a club Deep Ellum that says that it might not be the same thing as the podcast. I'm not searching Dungeons and Daddies on Google. I can tell you right
It's
now.
Freddie Wong. He's a big podcaster. It's not as negative as you're making it up to be.
I'm just saying, better titles.
Okay, so the biggest video on the network this week was a short 7-minute clip that I'm not going to recap the whole thing, but essentially I levied the accusation towards Senator Warren and tried to support it with as much evidence as possible that she is engaging in modern-day McCarthyism. Mm-hmm. The short version of this is that she has alleged that $130 million worth of cryptocurrency was used to fund Hamas's October 7th attacks. She used a bunch of supporting evidence that has been debunked not only by people who have proven her wrong with data, but the actual company who she cited the data from said, no, we never said that. So she is continuing to trot out these same statistics and coming out with basically a Bitcoin ban that was introduced and signed on by as you like to say, a wonderfully bipartisan group of So anyway, a bipartisan bill to basically ban all cryptocurrency. The issue that I have found with what she's doing is that she wrote a letter to a bunch of people that I know and some people that I didn't know that are in the industry that worked to debunk these allegations of hers, asking for the names, the locations and the daily activities and how they spend their time of all the people that contributed to debunking the report, and asking for named names of the people that were associated with them, their family members, literally trying to start a series of senatorial hearings to disallow people from a free and open discourse around the laws that are being made around their industry. I find that fairly disturbing. Some other folks did too. I guess the good news is that her bill has very little chance of passing because most of the folks that have co-signed on it have not enough clout to make it happen. Mm-hmm. But it is disturbing to see somebody that has a supposed reputation of one of the serious members of Congress. I mean, this is not like...
That's Santos or...
Santos or Hawthorne or somebody that's just kind of like out there making crazy allegations all the time.
Former Congressman Santos.
Right. But this is Elizabeth Warren, right? Supposedly, advocate of the people, anti-big bank. She's coming out there, siding with big banks, echoing Jamie Dimon of all people, saying that, we got to ban crypto.
Well, maybe don't take away the CFPR next time.
Yeah.
I can't have anything nice. Nobody gets anything nice.
Yeah. Perhaps.
I just don't know how you take something worth almost $1 trillion and...
Almost 2.
Yeah, I'm just looking at what it says Bitcoin price today.
Oh, Bitcoin's
total
1, yeah, but the whole
so,
market cap of everything is 1.7.
If you take that, for me, and again, it's personal opinion, do not get mad at me. I don't want to hear anything about it. But if you take the one that I know for sure is actually not owned by anyone, run by anybody, can't be turned off. If you take Bitcoin $1 trillion and you tell me that that you can't own it as an American, I don't know where you could own it then, right? Sorry, if I own it, I owned it, right? I don't know.
It's hard to tell if it's just somebody wrote that they threw it out and they were trying to do that, or
funny relevance. So the co-sponsor was on a hosted podcast for the U.S. Digital Chamber of Commerce. It was I guess a press release type, video live streamed, where he openly admitted that they asked the banks to draft this legislation. As he was saying it as a bragging point, we had help with the banks to get this.
I would like to point yet again to Bob Gurley's speech where he talks about, and I think we'll all appreciate that I learned most of my civics lessons from ABC and Schoolhouse Rock, and I don't remember the banks.
Just a bill.
Yeah, I don't remember the banks or anyone that isn't in the government drafting legislation that wasn't elected. So I'm not quite sure how that's relevant. And again, point to Bill Gurley's conversation about how that is not how legislation is supposed to. How dare you reference that you let the banks drop the legislation? I didn't elect Jamie Dimon.
Right.
Right.
Everyone knows lobbyists write all the bills, right? They don't even read them. Back in the early days of debt, when we were just $7 or $8 trillion, and all of a sudden it led to the Tea Party screaming about stuff and causing problems. One of the cries was read the bill, because the healthcare bill was passed in like 12 hours.
Yeah, and it was
impossible.
like
I read the whole
900
thing.
pages or something.
When it came down, I read the whole thing, and I was actually at town halls walking people through it. Stuff we all knew was going to happen. It was very obvious. That whole 85% forcing stuff, it was very clear. It was clear what was going on from it, and they just shoved stuff in there. And I sat down with, at that time, now former Senator Roy Blunt, who was running against Robin Carnahan in Missouri. And he was just, they were talking to bloggers at the time, and I said, what do you think about forcing people to actually read the bills? And of course, he didn't want to read the bill. He's like, oh, you don't realize how many bills there are. Like, and we have so many, they're like naming post offices. I'm like, that's not what I'm talking about. When you push it, and what happens is it was Reid and then McConnell, right? The back and forth. They kept tearing away at the norms of the Senate. Eventually, I have to get something through, so now we'll jam it through. So it became basically the people who run that as the majority speaker, majority of the House, and majority Speaker of the House, and majority, just control everything. It's not the people's house. It's those two people doing everything involved, and everything else becomes theater. What's weird, though, is they've torn up the norms so much now that no one can bother to read the bills, and so it doesn't matter what
That's why they have
say.
all these omnibus bills, right? They just add all this together. It's like, okay, let's put this in there too. Let's have this
think
in
through
there.
it. When in 2008, when the economy crashed and Bush threw all that money at TARP, like they threatened the congressmen, and what happened? They remember the first TARP bill failed. The Republicans failed to vote for it. And they put them all in the room and said, if you don't pass this, you will have global meltdown of the economy. And they managed to squeak by from doing so. And that opened the reins for Obama to come in and do the stimulus plan, because Bush broke the seal, basically, on spending that much money. He was just doing what they were still saving it. So they did the stimulus, which was a huge amount of money. But then a few months later, they passed the omnibus. And so what happens, it was so much money in the government, they didn't know what to do with it. So they just spent it, but they had no clue what to do with it. So they just made themselves rich by giving themselves raises. It was fascinating to see. Like, the government pushes something because we need to, but it's hard to spend that money. It's hard to focus on it. Fast forward 20 years, and what we're seeing, like the Colorado thing where they threw Trump off the ballot, that's a 4-3 decision by a judges to take someone off the ballot. You can't imagine that happening before 2016. You can't imagine someone taking off a major presidential candidate, no matter what they did. And I think what's happening is that people are starting to tune out.
Unless you've been in the Libertarian Party, you can imagine it pretty easily.
Well, then you're hoping.
Yeah.
So on that money part, going back to what you said before about like all that money and they don't know what to do with it. So there's I want to say it was in November, early November. It was like a 2 or 3 week period. So Governor Abbott signed legislation that allowed Texas to participate in this capital program, small business capital program, and it's federally backed, right? So the first step was we needed financial services companies, banks, to actually apply to participate, right? And then they could charge whatever they wanted to charge, and it was going to be fully backed by the federal government. So, like, there's no risk. They can charge, they get interest, and it's specific to small businesses in Texas, right? So there's programs, 39 other states that have this, but it's already funded to the tune of $500 million, $500 million, specifically tapped for small business owners, and no banks have applied for it in Texas. And it's over. You can't,
none of them did.
I have to look. I don't know yet, but I
crazy.
hadn't seen any up until that point. I reached out to all the local banks. They can't even spend. They can't. I want it, and it can't get to me. It's like being after a flood and just wanting a clean pair of underwear, but you can't get it. That's been donated. It's right there. It's in that fence, and I can't get it.
Right.
Where's my underwear?
Feels like Brewster's Millions.
It's so crazy.
They have all this money they can't spend. They don't know what to do. Buy a stamp, send it to yourself. But the reason I even brought up the Trump thing is not to get into that aspect of it, but it feels like, and already, not just politics, sports, and others. Do you remember when influencers started doing weirder and weirder stuff? Because human beings aren't meant to have a million followers.
Yeah.
So then they can't even conceive. Like, I know what my audience is when I create content on LinkedIn. But if I had 2 million views, there's no way for you to know at that point. So, and then you're juiced. I need those 2 million views. So you do weirder and weirder things. You end up sitting in a bathtub full of milk, and then you put in Fruit Loops, and the next thing you know, you're interviewing the president of the United States.
Right.
Like because you get crazier and crazier, and it's basically how do I top that is the next piece. I think that's where a good number of our politicians, certainly the older ones, are politicians, but in sports, entertainment, you have to do crazier and crazier things, but we've all tuned out. Mm-hmm. So who am I supposed to be outraged at? Do I worry about shootings that happened a mile from my home not that long ago? Or should I start screaming about Israel and Palestine? Like, where am I supposed to direct my anger? Mm-hmm. Instead, you just kind of shut it off. But then they have to get louder and louder because we're not. Why aren't you yelling at each other?
So,
why don't I get my attention anymore? We've tuned you out because you're just dumb.
So speaking of louder and louder, the NCRI report this week on this very topic. So this is speaks exactly to what you're talking about. So there was a report, NCRI, Joel Finkelstein, friend of you and I, that works there, one of the, I think the executive director. He published a report that said that there is absolutely Chinese state influence that's shaping the attention of people that use TikTok versus the comparable product on Meta, Instagram Reels. And they did it was 30 pages of different graphs, different topics, and it's basically a homogenous set of information until you start getting into topics that relate to the state and foreign policy. It relates to China. So things about the Uyghur massacre are suppressed on TikTok.
Uyghur, I think that's
Uyghur. I never said it out loud before.
I didn't. It's a crazy thing. The first time I heard it, I was like, that can't be right.
Yeah. Then there's the Ukrainian conflict, the starkness on the graph between what it's relatively, pro and anti, kind of equal amounts, a little bit tipped towards the Ukrainian side on Reels. On TikTok, the amount of pro-Ukrainian messaging is almost a rounding error that's allowed this to come through. The Palestinian-Israeli conflict, the pro-Palestinian side dwarfs the Israeli side, whereas it's kind of a little bit more closer to neck and neck on Reels. It's there's very clear evidence of specifically on TikTok, of the algorithm engineering towards controversy, and of the controversy that it's being engineered towards Chinese state interests. The only question that I have, having worked with Joel and the NCRI before, is the methodology on the data collection. I've worked with them on Twitter-based data research projects. I understand that methodology very well, but APIs are not openly available for both TikTok to Instagram that allow you to see the fire hose like you can on Twitter.
I'm going to say something you're going to be mad at.
I want to understand a little bit more about methodology.
It's because of that comedy show we went to the other night. So it's just a bit.
Okay.
So let me get this straight. Our social media and entertainment companies bow down before foreign tyrants to make sure they can have access to their markets. And now we're mad that they don't return the favor?
Yeah. Why wouldn't we be mad?
We manipulate our own news.
No, for sure.
And wait a minute, somebody else is doing that too? That's not right. It's just hard.
I'm not saying it's surprising, but it is something that is not universally agreed upon. And TikTok has been doing a great job of covering for the fact that they are doing it by essentially lying to Congress. They got in front of a congressional hearing.
But so did Facebook, and so
they're
did
not
Twitter
doing
before it was X, and so did.
Sure.
Is it a matter of degree? Is it a matter of who? I mean, look, I'm not a TikTok fan. I thought they'd ban it. I'd be fine with doing it. So I hate people. I don't even look at it, and I don't have the app, and I refuse to, and I make fun of people who do because I know what that is. It's just poison for your head. You're an idiot if you're on TikTok. It's okay to say that. It's fun, it's cool, but you might as well just be doing drugs, which you usually are. But it's just soapophoric. That's all it is. It's getting to you 15 seconds to change stuff, and I know you guys love it, but what do you think is going to happen?
Because you watching this TikTok right now are amazing, and I love you, and keep doing it. Hit like.
But then we're stuck. But that's the whole point of the Mastodon itself instances. As you were talking a long time ago, large networks are going to die, and they should, because of course they're going to be manipulated. Why wouldn't you? Yeah. Take advantage of it. If you don't, someone else will. So how do you get the smaller ones?
Hopefully the win here, and the way I see it is like, originally there was the Mad Men, right? Madison Avenue and all the advertisers, and they had such control over what we were going to buy and what we're going to do. And because of all the influencers and mass influencers, that did allow for smaller vendors to create cool stuff and get it pushed out through fake new advertising, platforms.
Chesterfields taste good like a cigarette should. No.
Yeah, like there's no Marlboro Man, but you could have somebody who is, followed by 1 million people who says, "Hey, you should try Bud Light Lime." They get a check for $2,500, and you put a little tiny little thing at the bottom. This is a paid endorsement. Meanwhile, your boyfriend is running around from the Fort Worth Rodeo and taking pictures of it in these venues, and they don't actually sell it, right? I'm not saying that actually happened when I was dating an influencer, but I'm not saying it didn't. So, we know that it's fake. We know that it's made up. They do have this stuff, but it's like it did allow for new products out there to pay smaller checks to try to get more viewers, which allowed for now all these Etsy's and all these Shopify's and all the smaller vendors that are selling stuff. So I do think that that's another one of those intentions that no one really thought of.
Well, the Dollar Shave Club.
Yeah.
And now look at it. Well, now you have Henry's. And now you have everybody's subscription and toothbrushes and
yeah, but I just it's a lot easier to barely shave now and just let it grow for a couple of days. So
I literally wax back and forth. I vacillate back and forth on, do I shave it all down to look younger? Do I leave a little scruff to look tougher? Because it gets gray enough that I can't pull it off anymore. And,
Well, you've got the dimpled chin, so you got to keep that
It's
showing.
called a butt. Do you know how hard it is to shave that little thing right there?
No, Cary Grant, tell me. So,
It cuts a lot.
Yeah, I just think it's I do like that we're able to, whether people watch it or not, if we ever do get super popular, I'm still not going to answer you, so please don't yell at me, don't hate on me. This is as real as it's going to get.
What are you not going to answer?
I just I don't watch TikTok, and I'm not trying to promote anything either. I just want to try to help educate people with the things that I found and the mistakes that I've made in life. And so I find it fascinating to give my opinion for someone who actually luckily has made it through life so far without anything ridiculous, and try to pass that knowledge on the markets and on financial stuff, and my opinions on things like, things that don't matter. Like, they do matter. Like, it's a big deal that we've got leaders of our country that are making opinions on things they have zero idea how they work and what they possibly are, and that we've given them that power. And then the one time that we actually honestly said, "Hey, yeah, we like that guy on TV. He seems like a total dick, but he gets stuff done." And then he won. Right. And we were surprised that he was no different than he was on TV.
I think it was Hotline Bling that did it.
Right. Yeah. And then now all of the leaders of the free world are pissed.
Yeah.
They're pissed because they see our disdain, that we don't really take them seriously, but we take them seriously enough to know that they're doing the wrong thing and we don't like it.
Yeah.
We're serious. It's us. I don't care. Now you're admitting that you're letting lobbyists write policy.
And to eat my own dog food, me complaining about social media.
Yeah.
Kind of like what I was complaining about before. I mean, I did literally make my career using social media.
True.
To push my name. I didn't do the traditional stuff. I didn't get published.
Fair,
so I don't get to complain.
Social media was federated and decentralized when we started using it, and it became subsumed by 3 companies about 10 years into it.
Right. But I'm just saying I don't really have the moral authority to make fun of other people for not complaining in the beginning when I did literally the same thing.
Yeah.
Well,
I made millions of dollars on social media over the course of 20 years, and I can't go now, "Oh, it's poison," without pointing out. But I still write on LinkedIn.
You can still see where it's changed, though, and you can see where it was done right and wrong, and you can
I mean,
could judge based on that too, right? And the wrong uses of it and espouse against that.
It could still be
I'm
amazing.
using my platform to use it against the bad things that are happening in the medical community. It's like we should put spotlights on the things that we see that are wrong if we have enough relevant
someone else
information.
will too.
Yeah.
You're kind of stuck into the.
I think the problem was, and this is certainly this is reflective of me. I'm not trying to make you co-sign on this, but I've thought a lot about it because I was
you need an apartment,
huge
afford the rent
advocate. Different kind of co-sign. Appreciate the offer.
I
might.
watched that Norm thing.
Who knows? We'll see how it goes. The
roll for damage.
Yeah. the thing that makes me think, because I was a huge advocate for social media and new media back during it, specifically the part that changed my mind, the one watershed event in the news that changed my mind was the Rathergate scandal. That was like where social media and blogs proved that they were better at quickly disseminating and fact-checking information. Remember that whole letter that was supposedly proved that George Bush had faked his military record. And then it was Dan Rather put it on the news, and then the blogosphere came out like within days and said, no, that typewriter didn't exist in that year. This couldn't have possibly been real. And just a million nerds all at once, like the Shakespeare million monkeys on a typewriter.
Everyone's
producing
experts on
Shakespeare.
kerning all of a sudden and this electric and
Yeah. But like, so that to me said, okay,
was amazing.
we have a new system that is by default better than the broken old
we
system.
humiliated Dan Rather.
Yeah.
And then that's just the big one. There
And
were
that ended his career.
thousands of those examples
Look
where
what's happened
somebody
in the
was
past
formerly.
year.
So to me, that was what shifted me towards this thing that has now become the monstrous beast that has destroyed our ability to gauge what we should care about, as you've pointed out earlier today. And I think about how do we get that from there to here? And I think we didn't think too much about gamification, right? It's just a different system. That's why one of the reasons why I pay so closely attention to the world of blockchain. And when you've brought things that have the word blockchain in it to me before, and I've said, oh, no, I don't like that. It's because you got to think about gamification and incentives. Just because it's a new system, that can by default mean it's better than the old one, but that can also lead to horribly unintended consequences.
It's still up 4x, by the way. Anyway.
Yeah, you can make a lot of money on Ripple too. Doesn't mean it's a good product.
I used to drink that. It was horrible.
Yeah.
What do you think? The wine. The wine. Oh. Right.
Roll for damage.
Anyway. Okay, I think we've got like 2 minutes left if you want to throw any other dad jokes in or Christmas cheer before the end, but I think we've...
Yeah, how about a little Christmas cheer? Happy holidays to everyone. Thanks so much for paying attention to us and riding along this ride for us. And we hope to bring you some more stuff in the future too that's relevant, fun, and creative. Thoughts? Happy New Year wishes?
I just remind people, I wrote a piece about this on LinkedIn. I just remind people that life is good, and even when it's bad, it's good. You should just be grateful that you have it. Mm-hmm. Better be above ground than below it. Mm-hmm. And I think if people understood how wonderful it is to actually be alive in these times, and just showed that gratitude, it makes a big difference.
Drive slower. Smell the flowers. Take the back roads.
When you get a moment of happiness over the holidays, really sit and just take that in. Just take it in, and because that will help you in the future. Mm-hmm. I think back to my 50th birthday party. I had all these people around. There was a moment where everything kind of stopped, and it felt like I was in a little bubble. I was sitting back in a booth, and I had about 30 people just sitting, chatting, hanging out with each other, not talking to me. There was just a brief moment, and I had such bliss knowing that my friends and my family, many who hadn't met each other before, some from out of town, had that opportunity to sit and talk to each other. And I had such just joy at that moment to know that my friends and family liked each other, were having a good time. And I wanted to make sure I remembered that. So anytime in the future, if I ever felt bad, I remember that moment. Try to take advantage of those on this Christmas, because it does help you.
Put down your phone.
Term.
Put down your phone. Be in the now.
Get an Apple Watch so that you don't have to look at your phone.
And then we can talk.
In fact, put this in place of the Yule log. Just replay this episode on repeat, right?
Chestnuts roasting on an open fire.
Oh my God, that would be so funny.
So I mean, like,
welcome to holidays. We're going to listen to me and my podcast and my roundtables for a couple of hours.
Yes, absolutely. I asked you the other day how things are, how it's going. You said it's about average.
Better than yesterday, worse than tomorrow.
Yeah.
No, the other way.
Worse than yesterday, better than tomorrow. Yeah. Actually,
average.
For me, it's I will say that the thing that is because everybody gets caught up in the weeds of mundane torture that is sometimes present in life. But for me, every day this year has been better than every day last year, and I'm thankful for that. So
it's true.
For sure.
So on that note, I hope the same is true for you. We will see you on the next Merge Roundtable. Join us then.
Hey, thanks for watching The Merge. We've got a ton more stuff for you to watch on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok, everywhere. Check us out.